We're going to start by making your pasta. So place 100 grams of something called 00 superfine flour into a bowl that's needed for making pasta. Crack an egg into the mixture and you can use a fork just to whisk that in until it's mixed. It will look like a strange clumpy mixture to start with, but in a minute when you can bring it together with your hands on the surface. What your aim is to make a smooth and silky dough. At the moment it will be rough. It shouldn't be too dry at this stage. If it is dry, just add a tiny bit of water on your hands and kind of work it in. Keep kneading that until it's really smooth. I've kneaded it there for a good 10 minutes. Once it's smooth, place it in a plastic bag in the fridge so there's no air getting to it, otherwise it will dry out. So we're going to make the cheese sauce now. You need 25 grams of regular plain flour. Just try and be fairly accurate with this because you don't want the sauce to be too thick or too thin. It's the flour that will thicken the sauce. You'll also need 300 millilitres of milk. Make sure you're measuring this at eye level to get the correct quantity. And you'll need 25 grams of vegetable fat spread or butter. You can grate your cheese on a white chopping board, being really careful not to cut your finger on these sharp bits of the grater. Grate that cheese and then you are ready to go on to the next stage. So you need to melt your butter in a pan. This is the 25 grams of butter that we measured just now. Melt that and then you're going to add in your plain flour. So this is going to be mixed in to make something called a roux, R-O-U-X. It's a thickened mixture. I've actually cooked it there for a couple of minutes, but you need to move it around so it doesn't burn on the bottom of the pan. This mixture is what's going to thicken this milk. Add a little bit of milk at a time to start with before adding the rest and whisking it. If you just add all the milk at the start and don't mix it properly, it will go really, really lumpy. It will also burn into these corners of the pan if you don't get the wooden spoon in there and really kind of scrape around the edges. It will just thicken up because of the heat in those areas and burn onto the bottom of the pan. So you really want to make sure you're constantly whisking followed by stirring around the edges and the bottom of the pan, sort of scraping the spoon against it. Once it's fully thickened, you can then move on to completing your pasta. So I've taken the pasta out of the fridge. This is a pasta maker and you've got a set of rollers. There's a dial here which has different numbers on it, which I'll explain more about in a moment. But what you need to do is place your dough between these rollers that you can see. So this dial goes from 0, which has a wide gap between those two rollers, and when you twist it they go closer together. So the idea is you place the dough between the rollers and you roll it through. You do need to sprinkle a little bit of flour on the pasta machine and a little bit of on your pasta itself so that it doesn't stick. Although if your pasta's dry, a little bit too dry, don't do that. So you place it through and roll it through on the widest setting. And you do that a couple of times, just making sure that it's not going to stick anywhere. So you put that through, followed by rolling it back up for this first go on 0, for this sort of first round. And that helps to make it smooth and silky, a really nice texture. So you can do that. Once you've done that a couple of times, I've just changed the dial onto a setting where the rollers go a little bit closer together. You do need to check your dial because sometimes they start on 0 and go up to 9, or start on 9 and go up to 0. So just check. And you're going to continue to roll that through until you're on setting 6. Now I actually did mine a little bit too thin. I did it to about setting 8 or 9. And so from doing that, I know that you need to do that a little bit thicker for a lasagna. So once you've got that, just make sure, by the way, that you've put flour on your surface so that it doesn't stick to the surface, because it will do that. And it also dries out if you just leave it, so be careful of that. Put your pasta sheet onto your layer of bolognese that you've just put into your oven tray. Your cheese sauce on top of that. Don't worry that it looks a bit thick and stodgy at the moment. It's thickened up because it's cooled down. It will go back to its normal self when it's warmed up in the oven. Place the rest of your bolognese, on top of that, followed by another lasagna sheet and the rest of your cheese sauce, with a little bit of grated cheese on the top. That will go into the oven, and the cheese will go golden brown.